Good afternoon, everyone out there on YouTube. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda B3K. In this video, we're going to replace the spark plugs and coils in my 2001 Ford F250 Mildew. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so we're doing plugs and coils as part of a general tune-up. This engine has 270,000 plus on it. Previous guy wasn't super big on maintenance. He wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. And I've been having some misfire issues on cylinder 3 and cylinder 6. So I'm going to go ahead and just check everything out, put in new shiny, take her for a test drive, see what we get. First thing we got to do, we're going to work on the driver's side, and the boom tube or the air intake has to come out. If you've seen my other videos, you know how to do it. If you haven't, unscrew that, pop this out, disconnect that, pop that lower hose out, and the whole tube comes out. So let's do that, and then we'll continue. Okay, so we got the boom tube out, made some room. The next thing we got to do is the fuel rail needs to come up, because 3 of the 4 coils are pinned in by the fuel rail. So when you do this, take it slow, because we don't want to take the injectors out. We just want to take off the hats, the actual where the rail sits on the injector. There are 2. Here's one of them, and the other one's down there. 8mm bolts that hold down the fuel rail. I think we'll just be able to move it, and we're not going to need to disconnect this vacuum line, which goes to the fuel pressure regulator. Before I do anything further, I'm going to take some air and clean out as much of the detritus that's sitting in there that I can, because I still don't want to run the risk of a piece of dust landing in the top of the injector and then fouling it. So get this as clean as you can before you go any further. Alright, got the bolts out, and we'll lift the injector here in a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and work on cylinder number 5, which is right here before the injector. See the tab right there? I want to lift that up and pull. Comes right off. There's going to be I think it's an 8mm, let me zoom in here. An 8mm keeper bolt for the coil. That's got to come out. And once that's out, we can gently wiggle the coil out. And once we do that, we need to inspect the boot well, make sure there's no junk in it before we pull the spark plug and then open up cylinder number 5 to atmosphere. Alright guys, so this is from number 5. As you can see, there's a bunch of garbage where the boot's sealed in the well. So before we go any further, your lady. Alright, and you can't see a darn thing, guys. Hang on, I need light. Alright, so there's the well. You can see it's pretty deep. Spark plug's at the bottom, and there is a bunch of garbage in there, so we want to get that out before we pull the plug. Alright, so hit it with some air, and an amazing amount of junk flew out, but it looks good now. So the next step is you're going to need a 5/8 spark plug socket, 3/8 extension so you can handle the well, and then start taking it out. These are not the 3-valve spark plugs where it's going to break. These should come out okay unless you got a rust problem, but still, take it slow. If it looks too scary, stop. You don't want to break a plug off in the block without the appropriate tooling. Okay, so this is what came out. It is a Motorcraft Platinum plug, and it's rough. The tip of the plug there looks wider than normal because of all those deposits, And it's just, this plug has been in here a very long time. Give you a comparison. There's the Motorcraft, and then here is its new ingoing NGK equivalent. He's a little rough, so this was definitely needed. And we'll go ahead. I'm going to get some anti-seize, put them on these threads so that we can get this back out in 50, 60,000 miles or 100,000 miles. And we'll go ahead and reinsert. Alright, so the plugs I'm putting in are NGKs. They are TR55GP. That's how you can look them up at your parts store or Amazon. They are single fire platinums, which is the equivalent of this Motorcraft that was installed. It's a good plug. It'll work well with this engine. And excuse me. And that's what I'm going with. Alright, so I've got this plug most of the way in. I locked it in with my spark plug socket so I could get it back in. Put some anti-seize on the threads, like I said, so we can get this back out. That's this stuff here. And when you go to tighten these up, it's going to get tight, and then you turn it just a little bit more. And that's it. You don't need to tighten it any further because you can over tighten these and then again crack, failure, and you'll be very sad because then you got to get a broken spark plug out of your cylinder head. So you don't have to kill these guys. Just a little bit past where it feels tight, and that's it. Alright guys, so I'm replacing the coils with Delphi coils, if this will focus. There we go. Or not. Let's see. There we go. It's a GN10164, and got a good deal on these. So to put it back in, it's kind of the same way as you took it out. You're just going to shove the boot down on top of the plug. As you can see, there is a little metal cap that's going to sit on top of the spark plug. And what you may also want to do is throw a little dielectric grease in there. Keep it nice and tight. That's up to you though. So I'm going to do that, and then we're going to move forward with lifting the fuel rail so we can work on the other ones. Okay, so I've got the coil in. I'm starting to put the keeper bolt back down, which turned out that was a 7mm, by the way. So when you stick a coil on, if it's all bouncy, you don't get a good feedback response on if you're seated on the plug. So give it a gentle couple of tugs. Make sure that that metal cap is grabbing the top of the plug, and then go ahead and lock it in with the keeper. Okay, so once you got it tightened back in place, again, don't kill the keeper. It's not a big bolt when you're driving through plastic. Just push your electrical connector on, give it some tugs to make sure it locked, and that's it, you're done. So now we're going to get this fuel rail out of the way. Let's see here. Yeah, that's what I thought. We're going to have to kind of gently pry on that to get that up without yanking the injectors out. So let me work on that. Alright, so I got the rail off, and I will tell you that it was a bit sticky. So in some cases the fuel injector did pop out. If that does happen, try to just guide it back to its hole and pull it back down there so the tip doesn't get dirty. To get the angle and everything that I needed to get, I am currently sitting on the edge of the hood where it sits, and my feet are placed where the air intake goes. There's some metal plates there that let me get in and get the angle I needed. But as you can see now, cylinders 6, 7, and 8 are now accessible, so we can go ahead and get on them. Keep in mind, you do not want to leave your fuel system like this. You don't want anything coming in the top. So make sure it's not dusty, windy, whatever. This is actually going to be an interesting challenge when I go to blow out the other plug wells. I may temporarily put the rail back on when I do that, so that stuff won't get in, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the remaining 3 coils since I'm replacing them all anyway, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so what I did is I put the rail back on the fuel injectors, and then I cleaned the holes one by one with some air, and I put a paper towel inside the cleaned hole so that when I clean the next one, stuff didn't blow out and land in the hole. All that's done now, so I'm going to start pulling paper towels and then actually get to the spark plugs and pull those out. If your engine bay is pretty clean, you're not going to need to do all this, but this one sat for several years before I brought it back to life under a big tree, so it's pretty dirty. I also disconnected, I'm guessing that's the TPS, because the cable was kind of getting in the way. So if you choose to do that, don't forget to plug that back in when all is said and done. Onward. Okay, and that's it. It's all back together. I checked everything. I got the fuel rail reseated, got the bolts back in. I reconnected the TPS right there. And so we're all done over here. I'm going to go ahead and put the air intake back in so that I don't have to worry about stuff getting blown up into the throttle body, which happened, and I had to clean that out. And then we're going to move over to the passenger side and start working over there. Okay, to the passenger. So the first thing you'll probably notice is that the injector, or the spark plugs, are set further back. It's staggered differently, and cylinder number 1 is under the fuel rail, so none of these can be accessed until you get the fuel rail out of the way. But if you look a little deeper, the fuel rail is going to have a hard time to move unless this PVC hose gets out of the way. So I think the plan of attack is get the PVC hose up and out of the way, take the 8mm that hold in the fuel rail, get the fuel rail loose like we did on the driver's side. Make sure before we take anything that's delicate loose that we get this nice and clean on this side best we can. And I may or may not pull some of this rat's nest depending on how much maneuverability I have. So we're just going to start digging into it, and I will update you if I find something that is worthy, because procedurally replacing the plug and the coil is exactly the same as on the driver's side. Alright, so I needed a place to put my feet just like I did on the driver's side, so I've taken the battery out. I'll be putting my feet in the battery tray. Otherwise, onward. Okay, so PCV is out, and I have plugged the hole in the valve cover. Paper towel. I have loosened the fuel rail bolts. Okay. And now I'm going to work on doing what I did on the other side, get the rail separated from the injectors, and then we will actually get started on the coils and the plugs. One thing I forgot to mention is if your O-ring for the fuel injector gets stuck inside the rail, which is what just happened over here, take a pick like so, kind of fish up in here, carefully roll it down and out, hook it on the pick, and then you can just roll it back onto the injector. So that way you don't have one mysteriously fall off and then you put everything back together and you're whizzing fuel from an injector because you're missing your O-ring. Okay guys, we are done. Everything is back together. Make sure that when you put the fuel rail back on that it seats all the way down. It needs to be back in the original position that you found it, whatever that might be on your truck. As for cylinder number 4, which is all the way in the back passenger side, that was just a nightmare to do because I didn't remove any of the vacuum lines because they're all 20 years old and I didn't know what would happen if I tried to remove them. So I worked around them. I used 3-inch extensions, like 6-inch extensions, Just kind of squirming my hand in there, and you're just going to have to find a method that works for you with the tools that you have available. It's a pain. There's no other way to put it. It's just a pain in the butt. I slid this out of the way a little bit, so I had enough room for my feet. So remember, my feet were where the battery is. So if you do something like that, make sure you put all that back. Make sure that you've reconnected all the electrical on each coil, that you got everything seated, and once all is said and done, it's time for a test fire. See how you sound. Make sure that you're not going to have fuel spraying everywhere, and make sure that everything's seated, everything's firing, and that your engine computer doesn't try to choke you. So that's what we're about to do. We're going to do a test fire, and I'll get back with you. Alrighty guys, just finished up the test drive, and the truck is running much better, much smoother, a little bit more power, and most importantly, no more misfire codes. So that's going to do it for this episode. Please leave a comment. I like to read them, I like to reply to them, I like to learn from them. Please also like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that other fun YouTube stuff. And remember, I make the mistakes so you don't have to. I'll catch you guys next episode.